Let's try to put everything in perspective, if we can. Context, very quickly. David Ignatius, as we were saying, Mika tagged it as Failure Friday this past Friday, and yet as the day went on,
kept going.
Things got even crazier. I mean, you look at the health care laws, you look at everything he said, you look at Reince being fired, and then telling police officers, go ahead, take your hand off the, don't worry about it, rough them up a little bit. It was just, again, and his toughest defender said, that was a joke. That's not like any joke that any president's given before. But it just, what was last week?
Joe, it felt like a hurricane blowing through town. As you say, every hour there was something new, something destabilizing, and we're now in the position of people in a town after the hurricanes come through, looking around at what's the damage, how's it getting fixed, where are we going from here? I think we're all focused on General Kelly, the new chief of staff. He's a person who's shown that he has the ability to be a good, strong, supportive associate of very different people. He was the military advisor first to Secretary Gates, then to Secretary Panetta. Seamless transition. Right. Clear that President Trump is reaching out for a figure of order and stability. My question, Joe and Mika, does he know that at the end of this catastrophic 6 months, at the end of a week that highlighted what's wrong, does he know that he really is the problem? This, Reince Priebus had to go.
No.
Reince Priebus wasn't doing a good job for the president, but this wasn't Reince Priebus's fault, and that's my big question as we start really a new chapter in the White House. Does the president get it?
Andy Cord, as Richard Haas's music is taken away from the set 2 times.
Wow.
That's impressive. You're down with the kids. So anyway, as we move, oh, they finally silenced it.
Okay.
Somewhere on maybe the West Side Highway. They threw it in the water. So none of this matters, though. John Kelly coming, General Kelly, none of it matters, does it? If daughters, sons-in-laws, Bannons, if people can wander in and go around the general.
Scaramucci.
Yeah, which the mooch made sure people knew that he still had direct access. No, that doesn't work. It's a zero-sum game, isn't it? If one person can get around the chief of staff, everybody can get around the chief of staff.
There's this big preoccupation with who reports to the chief of staff, who reports to the president. The truth is every commissioned officer, special assistant to the president, deputy assistant to the president, and assistant to the president, reports to the president. However, they must respect the chief of staff because the chief of staff is held responsible for what's going on. And I had a test of needs versus wants. If you need to see the president, go see the president. Right. If you want to see the president, do not go.
Right.
Most people cheat, and they have, they come in with this need. It's a very thin veneer of need. You scratch on it once, and it turns into a giant want.
Right.
And so I had this rule. I want to know, as the chief of staff, before, during, or after you've seen the president.
Yeah.
If I don't know that you saw the president and you did, you went there for the wrong reason.
Right.
So it's the discipline, and General Kelly, I think, will bring discipline. The president has to allow that discipline to take place because he wants to hold the chief of staff accountable.
Right there. And actually, this Wall Street Journal says Reince Priebus wasn't the problem.
Right.
And the board writes this. President Trump announced late Friday on Twitter, how else, that he's replacing White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus with Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly. The decision was probably inevitable, given how the president publicly humiliated Mr. Priebus in recent days, and you have to wonder about Sessions, given that. But this shuffling of the staff furniture won't matter unless Mr. Trump accepts that the White House problem isn't Mr. Priebus, it's him. Presidents get the White House operations they want, and Mr. Trump has a chaotic mess because he seems to like it. He likes pitting faction against faction as if his advisors are competing casino operators from his Atlantic City days. But a presidential administration is a larger undertaking than a family business, and the infighting and competing leaks have created a dysfunctional White House. Also, you do have to wonder, who else is going to go, given the fact that I think he humiliated the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, far worse than he ever humiliated Reince Priebus?
Well,
I don't know. It seems to me that the Attorney General
Jeff
could
Sessions,
be in jeopardy.
Except Jeff Sessions, he doesn't feel humiliated. Jeff Sessions has a base. Jeff Sessions knows that if Donald Trump fires him, it's going to get ugly. It's not going to be anything like firing Reince Priebus.
So were those hollow, limp accusations and humiliations on Twitter from the president?
You don't have to channel Peggy Noonan this morning.
No, I'm just saying, did they mean nothing? Were they
He
weak?
expected.
Were they just...
He expected Jeff Sessions to be bullied, and he expected Jeff Sessions to just whimper away. And Jeff Sessions has made it known he's not going to do that. If Donald Trump wants to fire Jeff Sessions, he can fire Jeff Sessions. That we saw this past week how devastating that would be with his base. Because, again, I hate to keep bringing this up. Donald Trump was a Democrat until 2011, until he discovered birtherism and discovered a racist theory against a sitting black president would actually help him in the Republican primary. He gave money to Hillary. He gave money to, gosh, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the DNC. He gave money to Schumer. You name it. He gave money to Rahm Emanuel. You've got Scaramucci, who gave money to President Obama. So, you know, he can point at the news media and call them fake media. But if you go after, let's say, Jeff Sessions, who the Republicans have known for decades,
which he did,
and you fire that guy, suddenly you see what we saw this past week which is a lot of conservative analysts coming out going, bridge too far, brother.
That's right. Look, the difference between Reince Priebus and Jeff Sessions is that President Trump can replace Reince Priebus, which he did obviously with Kelly. The Senate, Republicans in the Senate have made clear that they're not going to confirm a replacement to Jeff Sessions, which certainly does give Jeff a lot more, the Attorney General, a lot more leverage than he would otherwise have. But it's also an indication that we are starting to see the institutions of the U.S. government start to stand up and say, no, we're not going to get pushed around like this. These are norms that are in place for a good reason, and that's why you have police officers coming out saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this loose talk from the President of the United States about roughing up suspects. You get the Boy Scouts out there coming out saying, look, this isn't a civic institution where we preach values. We don't try to use these kids as a
Think about that, Josh. This is a great point. We've had the courts push back on the president. We've had the legislative branch push back hard against the president. We've even had this past week the leader of the Boy Scouts as an organization. We've had police officers, organizations doing the right thing. Everybody is pushing back against the excesses. And even this past week, you had Chuck Grassley say, yeah, you can fire Sessions if you want to. Exactly. You're not getting anything in return.
Yeah, look, and I think that's what's important about this Russia sanctions legislation that was passed. Then, so obviously,
it's a big pushback.
A big pushback, probably the biggest one I think that Trump has faced from the Congress. It was bipartisan, which is important, and obviously is on a core national security issue. Where Trump is already quite sensitive. So I think that was an important step. And I do think that as we go through the summer and the fall and we face some other steps about keeping the government open, raising the debt ceiling, what role are Republicans and Democrats in the Congress going to play together to make sure that we're protecting these important norms that President Trump seems to think are not that important?
Yeah, Richard, the Russian sanctions bill was, I mean, a highlight of this past week. But you look at what's happening in North Korea. While all this chaos is going on, more troubling news out of North Korea.
Well, that's in some ways the big story, which is this juxtaposition of a world that's coughing up enormous challenges. North Korea, what's going on in the Middle East, Russia, that we have as crowded and as demanding a foreign policy inbox as we've had in modern times, against the backdrop of an administration in disarray. And the other thing we left out was health care. All these dynamics going on in Washington and just consumed by personnel issues, consumed by political issues. But the world, the world doesn't kind of say, okay, we're going to give you 6 months or a year to time out America. Right. The world doesn't go on pause. And what's so interesting is, think about it, Joe, we have yet to have a real international crisis. All the crises of this administration are essentially self-generated. Right. But they're coming. And I don't know whether the first one will be an Iran-Saudi war. I don't know if it'll be North Korea. I don't know if it'll be something with Russia. Could be Venezuela, given the vote yesterday. But real crises are coming down the pike. And I think that the real question then for us, is this administration even beginning to be ready to handle a real crisis?
And there's a bigger problem, Mika, too. When the crisis comes, everything's more difficult because Pew just put out some polls that showed that America's standing in the world, not just Donald Trump's, but America's standing in the world is plummeting. And has plummeted over the past 6 months.
And that's exactly the point that I wanted to take a look at,
Look
Heidi.
at that.
I mean, if you have a president who is belittling everybody and everything on Twitter, from North Korea to China,
by the way,
his Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Just for people that are driving, a favorable view at the end of the Obama administration, 64% of America. We're down to 49% now. And unfavorable has been rising.
Then you have everybody pushing back and literally having to raise this president, I guess in a way that his mother never did, saying, no, that's not how you talk to law enforcement, and that's not how we treat human beings. No, Mr. President, that's not how you talk to Boy Scouts. That's not how we raise them. No, Mr. President, we don't take people's health care away. No, Mr. President, Senator McCain will vote no against you. Everybody's saying no. He has been humiliated step after step after step in every failure because of basic common sense in terms of how to speak, mostly, Heidi, on Twitter.
And I think that is why there's justifiably, Joe and Mika, some skepticism here in Washington about just how much Kelly can do once he gets into position. Yes, he's a battle-hardened commander who can maybe bring some discipline to the White House, but as you just enumerated, Mika, all of those things, some of the biggest catastrophes of this administration, including the firing of James Comey, now this political blowback over flogging Sessions, these are all things that the president has done. These are not problems at the staff level in terms of some of these leaks about who's knifing who at the White House and the palace intrigue. No, the big stuff that's really hurt this White House has come from the very top. And that's why I think it's very much up in the air whether Kelly can impose that kind of discipline on the president himself. It's about his discipline. It's about his lack of judgment.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that in this failure of health care, just how important leadership is. Leadership from the Oval Office in the White House to getting something important done in Congress. And the president just wasn't there, Mika. I mean, he was throwing tweets from the sidelines.
You know, David Ignatius, mothers try their best. But it seems the lack of discipline in this, I see 70 years old, and it's very hard to understand the strategy here, and then a lot of people call it behavior, but it is impacting our place in the world.
He has a very defensive, impulsive way of behaving. We've all been watching it. You could try to go to the roots of it in terms of his biography, but you know, most of us aren't qualified for that. We do see again and again the same kind of behavior. So the question is there a way to organize the people around him in a way that those traits are not as damaging to his presidency? I mean, look, we're 6 months in, and he's accomplished nothing of his domestic agenda. He hasn't begun to get to infrastructure, tax reform, the things that people were counting on, things that markets have already priced in. His foreign policy really has made essentially no progress on the major crises he identified. One thing I'd say is that the events of the last week do give him a chance for a reset, and in particular, the Russian, I think, overreaction of demanding 755 expulsions of personnel working for U.S. diplomatic facilities in Moscow. They've overreached. Essentially what happened here is that Congress pushed back and said no. They said no to Trump's policies. They said no to Putin. So there's an opportunity for good diplomacy, steady diplomacy, and perhaps the beginning of rebuilding if the president's smart.
Richard,
never know.
do we even have 755 personnel working in Moscow?
It would be a generous count. It would include all the hosts, the Foreign Service nationals, you know, people who work at the, no, what you'll end up are even numbers between Russians serving in the United States, Americans serving in Russia. And I think what it reflects is also Putin's conclusion that all of his hopes for a better relationship, that Trump could essentially deliver a new, pardon the expression, reset in U.S.-Russian relations, is gone. And it's one of the great ironies of the first 6 months of Trump's presidency. The one foreign policy issue he came into office consistently caring about, trying to bring about a much improved U.S.-Russian relationship, is out the window because he lost his credibility, and Congress essentially filled the gap. And I think Putin essentially said, this is gone. So now what Putin's doing is staking out the positions Putin stakes out on most issues, which is the tough nationalist position. Putin can't deliver anything on the economy.
Right.
Politically, Russia's a bankrupt country. What he can be is muscular with cyber, muscular with military force, now muscular with diplomacy. So Putin has reverted to Putinism.
Well, what a remarkable rebuke, Andy Card, by Congress.
No, well, first of all, the president wants to manage inside the White House with having people stab each other in the back. He kind of invites the infighting. And then he tells Congress they have to get along. And they say, which is it, Mr. President? Your own team isn't getting along. How do you expect us to get along? He's not setting the right example to create a climate of governing.
And Mika,
people
there's
working together.
just not the fear of Donald Trump on the Hill anymore. And you know, he attacks Republican members. Of course, he attacks Democrats all the time, but you can go down to the list of Republican members that he has attacked. And I mean, the dumbest thing last week was Lisa Murkowski. Yeah. I mean, I've told you the story. You know, he attacks Lisa Murkowski through Zinke, and she immediately is like, well, wait a second, we're not going to approve any of your people. And by the way, I've got the purse strings. And he actually put her in a position where she had to vote no.
It was unbelievable.
Donald Trump made her vote no by doing that. You push somebody into the corner.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to respond every time.
And now it's getting easier for Republicans to say no, because the door has been opened and many have walked through, and they've made it to the other side, and they like that room they're in now. It's much more comfortable. It feels for them like freedom, you know, to the point where they can make their own decisions. They're not going to be strong-armed by the president or one of his, and quite frankly, Ryan Zinke really let the president down. He should have said, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
That will not look good for you.
It never looks good.
He let the president down.
Richard, I always tell the story. I don't think I have on camera, but I always tell Mika the story. She has to hear the story every day. The first 6 months I got to Congress.
You were in Congress?
You remember BRAC, the Base Realignment Commission? There was a general in a certain service that lied to me. And just lied to my face. And my chief of staff, who had worked for Navy OLA, was shocked, and I said, I can't believe the guy. He just came in and lied to my face. Very powerful guy in Washington. He said, and my chief said, don't worry about it. About a week later, the guy came in, the general came back in. And what do you need? We're going to take care of it. Well, that was the members on my committee, the chair of my committee, and everybody else. They spent that week figuring out how to make that guy's life a living and breathing hell. Well, and they succeeded. So the guy had to come back and, you know, make good. That's how it works there.
Well, and what you're talking about is the difference between relationships, where you got to think about how your behavior one day will affect your standing another day, and simply transactional things. And again, that's where Trump's former life gets in the way. Yep. I had a question for you, though, which is whether we're beginning to see the early stages of Donald Trump not just running against Democrats, but running against Republicans. That he's taken them on health care increasingly. He's challenging them as the enemy. That we're now beginning to see a White House, almost pure populism, that's pushing just as much against the Republican establishment. We saw it in the inaugural address, where he didn't distinguish between Republicans and Democrats. That this is where Donald Trump essentially is going to go, because he can't work with people, so he's going to work against people.
I think so. That's what a lot of concerns on Friday we heard, Mika, about that, but it would be a horrible mistake. His home team, whether he likes it or not, are the 52 Republicans in the Senate.
They have the power.
And he has insulted Democrats so much. I don't know. I mean, Josh, I don't see Democrats saying, hey, we're going to help this guy now.
Well, in large part because he hasn't reached out at all. There really was an opportunity for him at the beginning because he was somebody who really did break the mold of a traditional Republican president.
Such opportunity,
and it was such a missed opportunity, particularly when you look at the electoral battlegrounds for 2018. You have all of these Democrats who represent states that Trump had won. That would be a golden opportunity for him to come in and say, "Hey, Claire McCaskill. Hey, Joe Donnelly. Hey, Joe Manchin. Let's try to cut a deal here. This is good. This can help me get my legislative agenda passed, and this can help you look good among your constituents." That is and he took the opposite tack. He took the Lisa Murkowski route to insult them and to cut them off and not bring them in. And there's a missed opportunity on their part.
Yeah, called really, I mean, in any White House knows this, the minority leader of the Senate, one of the most important people in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, if not the, for a president of another party if he wants to get things done. He calls Chuck Schumer, a guy that he's known, that he's contributed to, that he gets along with socially, called him a clown off the start. It just, you know, we'll say it again. We've been saying this since he got elected. If you declare war on everybody, everybody's going to declare war back on you.
On Friday, we read from Peggy Noonan's epic takedown of the president. This morning, another piece to add to the op-ed Hall of Fame. We'll read from the National Review's Kevin Williamson's column entitled Death of a Bleeping Salesman. And Kevin will join us live in our 8 o'clock hour. Also with us this morning, Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore is here on set. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.